Today's journey will take us to the deserts of Namibia. We actually come from the desert in Arizona, where we have a variety of different plants, such as these Joshua trees, and of course the saguaro cactus and many other cactus. Interesting wildlife such as a desert iguana. But what most people don't realize is that during the spring we get rains, and we often have beautiful wildflowers. And in the winter, on occasion, particularly in high elevations, we can get snow. But most people just know us from Western movies. Our journey begins in Namibia, where we rent a vehicle and drive across the desert, down into South Africa, looking for tortoises, which we don't find, see various lizards, and then ultimately come back, head to Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, see Victoria Falls. So stay tuned for our journey. The red line outlines the road trip we'd be making after we finally arrived after 33 hours of travel. Of course, they lost Kelly's luggage, so it was a quick trip, well, not to the bathroom, but to the mall to pick up clothes. We checked in our hotel, and the next morning we rented our vehicle, and then we were off. They drive on the left-hand side of the road, and it didn't take long before Kelly was called a bloody fool. You see outlined our route, map for each day of where we're heading. And fortunately, once we got out of town, there weren't many vehicles to contend with on the road. We were in prime tortoise habitat. Unfortunately, we didn't find any of these species listed. Even though we didn't find the tortoises, we saw aurochses. I wanted to say flamingos, but I know they're ostriches. And eventually we got to our destination and set up our tent. The next morning it was to the sand dunes. Just a spectacular sight. Dune 45, Big Daddy, the trees. Highly recommend anyone make the journey. Of course, part of the way you definitely need a four-wheel drive. You can see the sand on the road. I think at one point, eventually Kelly turned around and decided we couldn't make it. But we continued on to our next destination, enjoying the sights along the way. We still had a long drive before we'd reach our next destination at the Quiver Tree Forest. We'd stop every once in a while to take a picture of a street sign. Not much sign of life out there. And we saw this tree, and what was that in the tree? Yeah, there were these interesting bird nests. The bird had to approach from the bottom, but right above that, if you look carefully, there was a dead antelope, probably taken up there by a cheetah to eat later on. But it was back on the road. We eventually arrived at our destination. We rented a room so we had a proper bed, and we even had a place to cook some food. There's a pool that we didn't use, but we did stop and have lunch, and it was nice. Then we checked out the cheetahs, and as evening came, we decided to go night hunting. I was excited finding geckos, and Kelly saw some eyes he went to investigate. He assumed they were foxes, but it turned out it was a group of 3 cheetahs. That made him a little nervous, so he got scared, and that ended our night hunting. But the next morning was out to the Quiver Forest. We hoped to find some tortoises here. Unfortunately, due to the drought and the cool temperatures, there were no tortoises. But it was still just a spectacular sight to see these interesting aloes. Kelly decided to show off his strength. That big log probably weighed a couple pounds. You're also missing a lot of other stories, such as the gas cap we lost, or was it stolen, and the challenges we had of getting it replaced. Interesting. But eventually, once we were done with the Quiver Forest, we were back on our road. And interesting to actually see a sign. For several hours you see no people and no sign of life. Occasionally you have to make a stop or two. Old vehicles that didn't quite make it. And after a while we get a little punchy. And Kelly's video will show what happens then.
Alright, here with the two bloody fools again. Jerry, outside we have rock, sand, and desert that we are passing through. An hour ago, we had rock, sand, and desert that we were in. 2 days ago, we had rock, sand, and desert that we were in. A week ago, we had rock, sand, and desert. We came from rock, sand, and desert. Okay, I'm fine.
That was Jerry's impression of David Attenborough commenting on the rocks, sand, and deserts.
We've gone literally mad.
We've gone mad. Goodbye.
Eventually we made it to our next site, Fish River Canyon, and off to the hot springs where we would be spending the night. There were supposed to be tent tortoises here, but of course we didn't find them, though they did have a nice radiated tortoise on the sign. Eventually we made it to the hot springs, and the first thing we saw was this warning sign, "Beware of the baboons." We didn't give it much thought, and we set up our tent where we would be spending the night. It was a great little spot. We went hiking down the river, and you can see that building. We had nice grounds and a little shower building, and there were facilities for eating, which we took advantage of, having a great dinner. We didn't take advantage of the hot springs, but we had a great time. And then the next morning when we woke up, we saw a baboon.
We're in the Fish River Canyon at a campsite. Yes, that's a baboon. And yes, that's Jerry. Oh crap, he's going to our truck. Jesus, he's going to our truck. Get. I don't know what it is.
Fortunately, the baboon only got a loaf of bread and ran up the cliff to enjoy its spoils. And we were back on the dusty road, heading towards South Africa. And that's pretty much where part 1 ends. And part 2 will pick up as we enter South Africa.